Welcome to the Jagged Moon podcast. My name is Dr. Paul Hamilton, and I'm here with Professor Hunter Reeve, and we're here to discuss the question of what is friendship? Now, people are often asked the question, what is love? It's the title of many songs, but this question of what is friendship seems to be just as mysterious and profound. And I think that oftentimes we assume we know what it is, but actually we may not know at all. And certainly when we examine literature, the literary history, the history of literature and philosophy, we find concepts, expansive, generous concepts of friendship that may be unfamiliar to us. This is a time when in the United States, loneliness is regarded as an epidemic, and people seem to have a great deal of difficulty forming bonds or maybe even knowing what they are. And so we wanted to have this podcast to share some ideas, to revive some ideas maybe from the past, some conceptions of friendship that may be unfamiliar to us, and think about how they might apply in the present. So, and to be surprised and shocked, I think, by the ways that people view friendship in the past. So, I'd like to start off maybe, do you have any opening thoughts about this topic, Hunter?
Yes, I do. I believe, as you so aptly put it, that loneliness is indeed widespread, and that people either find it very difficult to sustain a friendship or to indeed even begin one that will last any length of time and effort. And I'm going to be reading a poem and talking about this on a deeper level, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, and I mean, it's no wonder when the most common term for friendship that I hear is the word networking. When people and people think about LinkedIn or Facebook as their go-to place for connecting, or Twitter for their go-to place for connecting with quote unquote friends. And you have on social media, people have 200, 300 quote unquote friends. How close are they to those people? And our interactions with those people are framed through social media posts that are often, people learn how to curate so that they are posting, the most idealized version, airbrushed version of their lives for other people. Where is the connection in that? And so I think that there is this yearning for connection, and I feel that I felt for a long time, and I think that you do too, that the 19th century, 18th, in fact, our whole literary history has answers to this loneliness and this yearning that people have that they may not have expected. So if you don't mind, Hunter, did you have anything else additionally that you wanted to say?
No, I'd like to follow up later with my poetry.
Okay, yeah, and so we're going to hear poetry. Hunter. Hunter is a poet, and she's going to share some of her poetry, and I'm going to take us through some examples from literary history and philosophy to help us to frame and understand this issue. So I want to start by going back to the 19th century to Ralph Waldo Emerson, and to think about the openness that is friendship. So I think that right now people craft an identity, and then they get on social media, they get likes and they hope that somebody will like them or that there will be lots of people who will approve of them. Now look at Emerson, who's famous for his essay Self-Reliance, rugged, solitary individual, but actually passionately reaches out towards others in a way that maybe people don't expect. So when he first wrote to Thomas Carlyle, actually this is back in 1834, he was introducing himself. Thomas Carlyle is a great Scottish writer of the time. And Emerson writes, "You express a desire to know something of myself. Account me a drop in the ocean seeking another drop." A drop in the ocean seeking another drop. Imagine the idea, the transparent boundaries that he imagines himself flowing and blending in with another person, that openness. And I also think of, when I think about Emerson, I think of the wonderful letter that he wrote to Whitman, the great American poet Walt Whitman, when he received Leaves of Grass. Emerson did not become good friends with Whitman, but what you see here is his openness to be transformed by another person, to allow another person in. He had a porous boundary with other people, not just to allow somebody in, but to be transformed and transfigured by another person. He often would say things like, "My soul is ready to be unlocked by the right person. Whoever can unlock my soul, they will have entry." And how can they unlock my soul? By being a transformative consciousness. So he writes to Whitman. He receives the most original poem that had yet been written in America. This was a poem that would be heavily criticized, let's say denounced in the press. There was a reviewer who told Whitman to commit suicide because he was so offended by what he wrote. This was not a poem that would get that would be acceptable to even in Emerson's circle of friends and among critics and in society that Emerson was very much a part of. But Emerson yet writes, "I give you joy of your free and brave thoughts. I have great joy in it. I find incomparable things said incomparably well, as they must be. I find the courage of treatment which so delights us and which large perception only can inspire. I greet you at the beginning of a great career which yet must have had a long foreground somewhere for such a start. I rub my eyes a little to see if this sunbeam were no illusion, but the solid sense of the book is a sober certainty. I wish to see my benefactor and have felt much like striking my task in visiting New York to pay you my respects." Okay, so he's willing to throw everything off to the side. He was always waiting for the moment that somebody could come and transform him. And I just feel that waiting for the person, the creative consciousness who can open him up, is wonderful. And do we have that kind of ambition, that kind of ideal for friendship now? Do we think of somebody who can come and change our life? I don't think that is a constant friendship that can be really.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject something.
Yeah. Of course, please.
Yeah, that I think that Facebook friends, quote unquote, are fine. They're more or less acquaintances. But we're talking about going deeper into friendships of some that develop over some time, even if they don't have a lot of time in the case of one dying. or having to leave the country or something, having a journey that is full of depth and high regard and wanting to change the other person for the better.
Right, and the expectation that friendship can be a great journey. And I mean, I feel that it's not so much that people don't have this idea that a person can be friends for life, but it's more like death by 1,000 pins and needles, that it just has gradually, or to use a different metaphor, that just it's gradually been chipped away and chipped away and chipped away by smaller ideas of friendship, and that this really heroic, for lack of a better word, or this large, grand, generous scope of friendship, a friendship that has a trajectory or a canvas of an entire life, seems to fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
And no, I mean, and I completely agree with you. It's not that those are are insignificant, but it's that somehow people are in a situation where they don't seem to be finding the connection in all of those friends. They're not they're not finding the connection. They're not finding those deeper friendships that provide lasting meaning.
Yes, that's very true.
Mm.
Did should I read my poem now? Shakespeare.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, let's, I mean, it's always great to go to Shakespeare to give us a kind of um, true north in terms of our concept of friendship. Would you like to read one of
Yeah.
sonnets on friendship?
Yes, this is Sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is a star to every wandering bark, whose worth unknown, although his heights be taken. Love's not time's full, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever lose.
Mhm. It's absolutely marvelous.
So
Mhm.
this poem uh, exposes, if you will, my philosophy that one must go, if they're a true friend to one another, must go to any lengths to help and assist the other person. And it isn't just a discursive relationship, it's something that has a lot of depth and scope.
Yeah, right. I mean, and marriage of true minds, and a lot of people read this at their weddings, and it's a wonderful ideal for romantic love. But I think that it also applies to friendship as well. Marriage of true minds, and the it raises for me the idea of the symposium, Plato's symposium, and the ascent of love physical love to mental, to in Plato's view, the love of the forms. But it the idea that love is something unconditional, that is and unchanging in a changing world, is something that I think we certainly have retained an intuitive sense of, but in the context of friendship, I feel like not to that ideal extent. I feel like people, the idea that 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 a bond, lasts through a lifetime and beyond is something that kind of breaks our current conceptions of things.
Yes, that's very true. And it reminds me of a movie I saw about two sisters and young women who really care about each other and
Yeah.
are true friends. And one unfortunately dies. But at the end of the film, and I can't remember the name of it, unfortunately, the young woman explains about her sister and says, the relationship of my sister and I continues. So even in after death, uh, these two find a common ground and can communicate in the spiritual world.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they've been, changed by each other, and because they've accessed something that is beyond or outside of time.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that shows that even with the edge of doom or whatever, friendship can go on eternally, forever. And friendship might include romantic love, but in my mind, it doesn't have to.
Yeah, that's not, and I think that that's ambiguous in the sonnet, but I think that it certainly uh, it can include romantic love, but I think that friendship is also enough. I think of in this context, I think of Montaigne, who wrote the most famous essays ever written, and they were a continuation, as he explicitly stated, of his friendship with another man, and he wrote 3 volumes of these essays, and they were written as a just as a continuation of a conversation that he had, and because he couldn't speak to his friend anymore, he just continued it, and I think that that's a testimony to a friendship that goes on after death and continues to change and develop after a person has died.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I myself experienced something like that where a friend died and was quite young, and we had known each other a long time.
Yeah.
And this was very shocking. But I'm able to still continue to communicate to her through our own relationship that continues after death.
Yeah, and it's that the relationship continues to develop and change. Do you have that poem, the poem that you wrote about him?
I think I do. I was going to read another one that
Okay.
shows
Um,
happened, but
I got it
I
here.
have it. Yeah, I do have
Okay.
it.
Okay. Would you want to read that since we?
Yeah, this is shows the eternal love I have for this woman. Somewhere in deepening night, you will be found among networks of trees, meadows, rivers, and streams, in wild ferns and flowers, red core. I'll fall on you and be born, perhaps, again.
Yeah.
So this again shows my communication after death and also my continued rebirth in life with this relationship.
Yeah, that somehow continues to renew and transform and change you. And it's it's absolutely um fascinating, the that it has this continued development. And I mean, I think that with Montaigne, you have a continuing, almost an infinite kind of conversation that goes on after his friend dies. And I think that is something I do not necessarily expect to come from a friendship, but it has to do with this, an openness to be transfigured by friendship.
Yes, it really does. And again, I think of Shakespeare with this poem I'm going to read that shows that this woman, another woman I cared a lot about, was in a terrible accident, auto accident, and badly injured. And I was able to help her, and I'm still helping her because we're lifelong friends. And I'll read the poem now.
Mhm.
I loved you through jagged truths you couldn't answer,
Mm.
through the high, sharp desert peaks. Outside your house, there are gigantic rocks. The green's now taken away from you. You're wounded, can't walk away. I came many miles to comfort you, only to fall in the snow surrounding you. I rise and wait for your call still. This poem really was an interesting journey for me, and I learned a lot uh, through it. And I experienced peaks and valleys
Yeah.
in this relationship. And the first part, I loved you through jagged truths you couldn't answer, shows that we weren't able to be honest with each other in a really confrontation in our relationship. And so we had to be honest in order to sustain the relationship, and we were. So that showed that we took the time and effort, which was very difficult to do so, to work on our relationship. So again, I hope that people continue to. I hear in my circle of acquaintances that people are attempting to find friendship and keep it, but in my larger knowledge of people, that's harder to sustain, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that yeah, it is it's difficult to sustain, and I think that it's I think it's also people um, I think that when I go back and I think about that when I was in high school, I didn't really have any cultural uh, um, norms or expectations that prepared me for the friendships that I would develop in late high school and in early college. And I think that that's partly because we somehow lack the key that unlocks the soul to another person. And I think that the key is really language, really poetry that unlocks it. Poetry mutually experienced and something that gives people it creates a porous boundary between people that didn't exist before, and that it initiates that kind of commitment. I think I was thinking about the Bronte sisters who maybe not a traditional friendship. They were sisters, but they invented this imaginative realm called Glasstown Federation together, and then the kingdoms of Angria and Gondol. And out of that creation of an imaginary world as children, they then developed their own voices and their own novels, each one feeding off of this imaginative sort of communion that they had experienced together. And I think in my own life, it was really Dostoevsky and the psychological analysis of Dostoevsky that gave me and my friends the tools to reach into each other and to have develop a shared and deeper understanding of one another. And of course, I also think about when we're talking about all of this, yeah, road imagery of Kerouac and Ginsberg, and even Tom Wolfe and the electric Kool-Aid acid test, where people it recount ego dissolving experiences of community that then lead to a connection, a deep connection that lasts a lifetime. There's a poem by a friend of mine, Larry Snydall, about Moby Dick, and he talks about the moment that Ishmael in Moby Dick, who's the protagonist, first experiences a a transforming language from a sermon, the sermon of Father Maple, and experiences the town near the ocean. And I think that this captures the kind of transformative experience that I'm talking about. So I'm going to read part of that poem right now. Ishmael. I walked to my first landing down to see the wide water put an end to earth. We all walk alone down to our first berth, away from home. Learn how to keep a knee outside the quilt, to test the temper of outlandish air. Learn how much more cover warmth would want, just as we learn what lover would wish us warm, would bring us more than love. I, like you, watched an amazing stranger ease the door open, whisper words I knew were nothing like the words I'd listened to before. I knew there was more than danger in those words. I shivered in the night air, but after revelry and the morning visit to the raving pulpit, warning me of dreams of death, how could I not dare salt sea? I love these lines. I, like you, watched an amazing stranger ease the door open, whisper words I knew were nothing like the words I'd listened to before. I think each of us each of us encounters an amazing stranger who eases the door open and whispers those words that are nothing like anything that we've heard before, and that opens us up. I am a drop of water seeking another drop, and and has the ability to transform us. And in the case of the Bronte sisters, they seem to have been transforming each other in this uh, communion of imagination that then fed like a tributary into their great fiction. But I think that if you don't have the openness to experience, and you don't have the language to experience it, how do you unlock your soul to another person? I guess that isn't. I'm wondering, what do you think, Hunter?
Yeah, I think that's very apropos to a poem I'm going to read, and talks about that in metaphorically.
Mm,
And the poem is called Samskara, which means, one of the main meanings is a guiding principle, an important situation or movement. And this poem is about the Central Coast where I live in California, that experienced some terrible storms in January, and it was a very difficult time, and I'm going to read it and then talk a little bit about it. It was a momentous winter, damp, cold, incessant raining, flooding, fragmentation, wreckage. You were treating your red scars. Exhausted, I sat by your bed. I held your hand, then kissed your forehead. Your energy renewed, blood returning. Right now, I'm not drowning. Rain continues. It's spring. So,
mm,
I I have a poetry page in Facebook called Hunter Reeve Poetry, and people make comments on my poetry, and I'm so delighted about that.
mm.
And people said that this poem, really, they could relate to it, and it unlocks something for them. And you were talking about unlocking souls, and this is one experience they say they had in reading the poem. And I think that poems are vital, as you were talking about, Paul. And
Yeah, without poetry, how can people unlock their souls? I mean, I think of music, but poetry is really the language that reaches into us and makes us porous to one another, and opens up worlds and gives us a way to explain ourselves and our feelings in a way that shatters cliches, so that we can access the deeper forces within our psyches and connect to one another. I don't see how people without without some access to poetry, to novels, are truly able to connect. Other than say I can understand if you're in a band and you're connecting through music, but some kind of language that explains these great unconscious forces that all of us have to encounter. And I feel like that there's also we have such a impoverished view of our own capacities, without poetry, and I mean that in a an expansive sense. When I think of poetry, I also think of the novels of Dostoevsky, the prose of Virginia Woolf, um, and the these literary works that open people up. I don't know what hope people have of reaching out and connecting with each other, because like with the Bronte sisters, it was literature that allowed them to create an imaginary world, to weave together an imaginary world, and then all occupy it together because they had a shared language that they developed. And then that then fueled their own original creative energy.
And I think that some people unlock this energy and creativity with hardships and with great courage. The Bronte sisters lived in a town where the water was contaminated, and
Yeah.
two of them died because of it.
Yeah, exactly. It was contaminated by runoff from the graveyard, actually, which then created some kind of bacterial contamination of the drinking water that led to great illness. And in addition to the fact that they were writing novels at a time when, and certainly with content that was so highly original and shattering of norms, and in a time when women were not expected to write novels, and nobody was expecting novels like that were so violent and imaginative and idiosyncratic and highly original.
Definitely.
I would like to say, about this idea. I feel that I would like to, if I could, I would wish that I could change the cultural expectations so that people looked forward to great epic friendships such as the one that you describe, and that have such a large scope for both across a lifetime and also depths and continued births beyond even the scope, the lifetime of the person, that somehow access something within us that is outside of time, a platonic dimension outside of time. I wish that for other people. And I go back in my mind to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is a novel that's not about friendship particularly, but that contains still passages that show an ideal of friendship in 1818 when she wrote it, that I feel exhilarated by, and an expectation of friendship that I find exhilarating, and a sense of the potential ideals that can be embodied in friendship. So I want to read a small passage from that right now, from Mary Shelley. This is the original narrator, Walton, who is on a voyage up into the Arctic. And he writes that he's writing to his sister, and he says, "I desire the company of a man who could sympathize with me, whose eyes would reply to mine. You may deem me romantic, my sister, but I bitterly feel the want of a friend. I have no one near me, gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well as a capacious mind, whose tastes are like my own, to approve or amend my plans. How would such a friend repair the faults of your poor brother?" And a capacious as well as a cultivated mind. He expects to be changed by a friendship. He expects that a friendship is going to expand his horizons, is going to teach him more about who he is going to refine his character. This is a high ideal for friendship. It was totally normal at the time totally expected that people would anticipate friendships like this, that they would speak in romantic terms, in very emotional terms about friendship, in personal terms, in ways that blur the boundaries between friendship and romance. And I just think that it's wonderful and inspires me. I wonder what your response to that is, Hunter.
Yeah, I think that it's just wondrous what you said about people having the opportunity to have lifelong friends or even friends for a time and take this spiritual journeys with them and actual journeys of going places, doing things, or just they could not even go anywhere in particular if they can't, and just enjoy each other's company
Yeah.
together. I think it's marvelous that people might get this opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, a high adventure, I think, a high adventure of exploration, of cultivation of one's mind, um, the ability to be transformed, the ability to understand new things about yourself that you never may have known before, but
Yeah,
also companionship across a lifetime, maybe beyond a lifetime.
yeah,
Um, we talked about when we talked about Plato's Symposium, an access to an ideal that is unconditional, and also we talked about that with regard to Shakespeare's sonnet. Um, So I would like maybe to end here, unless you have other passages which would be great to read. I would like to end with this 1841 excerpt from Emerson, who, again, I would love to end with his wonderful, his idealism, which is just so boundless. And quite a good note to end on the intoxicating language of Emerson here. He says, "My friends have come to me unsought. The great God gave them to me. By oldest right, by the divine affinity of virtue with itself, I find them, or rather not I, but the deity in me, and in them derides and cancels the thick walls of individual character, relation, age, sex, circumstance, at which he usually connives, and now makes many one." And this um, fusion of people is something that Emerson really lived. I think about he had epic friendships. His friendship with Margaret Fuller is a great example of one. Margaret Fuller, who wrote Women in the 19th Century, one of the great feminist books in history, and who died tragically in a ship wreck. And Emerson had an epic friendship with her, and an epic friendship with Thoreau, and a large group of others. And so his idealism here feels intoxicating, but it's something that he lived. Just as we have the idealism, but also the lived reality and scars in your poems. So I feel that with that vision of many becoming ones, the thick walls of individual character, relation, sex, and circumstances now making many one, derides and cancels the thick walls of individual character, relation, sex, and circumstance. And that sense that there was a deity within us, the great God gave them to me. The divine affinity of virtue itself chose these individuals to be my friends. There's a fatality about friendship. There's something godlike. I think about the daimon in ancient Greek, the ancient Greek view, the God within somehow choosing friends that then reveal potentialities that we never sought or that we didn't know, and the potential to change us.
Yes.
So did you have any closing thoughts here, Hunter?
Yes, I do. I just think it's been wonderful to partake in this podcast and reach out to everyone to possibly you could make comments or add or subtract to what we've said, write, send poetry or ideas. It'd be great. And so I wish everybody a great week and beyond that. And I hope to hear from you, or we hope to hear from you.
Yes, it would be wonderful to open up a conversation about this topic of friendship. What is friendship? What do you think is friendship? Do you have a specific response to any of the points we make? Are there examples from literature or history or philosophy that help to expand our notion, our concepts of friendship? And or are there other topics that we've discussed that you would like to respond to? Please feel free to comment or contact us. Certainly take a look at Hunter's poetry page on Facebook, which we will link to. And again, welcome, and we're very pleased to have you with us, and look forward to seeing you next time. Did you have anything else, Hunter, to add there?
No, thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys very much, and we'll see you guys next time.